would realize it's really a nice position to be in, because you can work very closely with conservatives who are very libertarian on economic issues. And therefore, I'm very strong with them, and they like that. But when it comes to personal liberties, when it comes to fighting the war on drug and on foreign policy, you tend to align more with the liberals. So you really, instead of a moderate giving away half the philosophy to each one and you know, trying to bring people together, you bring people together by sticking to the liberal principle views that I see as correct and sticking to the conservative viewpoints that I see as correct and bringing people together.
Has the leadership generally been helpful in giving you the committee assignments you seek?
I think so. I think a good example of being able to work under this system has to do with this privacy issue, the Know Your Customer issue, which was one of the articles that I had with me. But I think a lot of people know about Know Your Customer. This was the program where the banks, the government was enforcing the banks to set up a profile on every citizen. So it was a privacy issue, and privacy is a real good issue for a libertarian, because conservatives are good on it too. They finally say, hey, you know, why do we have to give our Social Security numbers? And again, the gentleman mentioned Christian Coalition. People in the Christian Coalition like their privacy too. They like their religious privacy. So, but liberals are good on privacy too. ACLU joined me in fighting Know Your Customer. At the same time, the Christian Coalition and Christian groups came together, and we essentially were able to defeat that by bringing it together. It's just that a libertarian can't bring liberals and conservatives together when they're compromising on spending more money. Too often, one of the criticisms I have for my own party is on education, instead of sticking to the principle saying the federal government shouldn't be involved in education. Remember, Ronald Reagan used to talk about getting rid of the Department of Education, and we talked about it in 1994. Now, conservatives too often are joining with the liberals, and they're coming up with this sort of moderate, mushy viewpoint on education. And actually what's turning out is conservatives are trying to outdo liberals on how much money is going to be spent on federalizing education. So that works in a negative sense when you try to get people together in a moderate fashion. But if you're looking at something like privacy or foreign policy, I think foreign policy now, we're getting conservatives to come together against Kosovo, but it's a natural tendency of many liberals. If it wasn't for Clinton being supporting of these troops, I mean, we'd have, you know, if Reagan was doing this, you'd have every single Democrat opposing it. But it's a good chance for a libertarian to point this out, that there's reason to defend the Constitution. There's a reason to defend neutrality and friendship and with all nations and bring them together. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I feel that much can be achieved.
Naugatuck, Connecticut. Thanks for waiting. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Paul. I not forgot, but didn't quite hear exactly what you said earlier about the marijuana issue. My question is, you know, with just the way things are, with the way things are brought up, especially now with Mexico, you know, with the whole drug, how they're coming in and this and that, and it's kind of being, you know, the marijuana gets thrown in. I like to call it cannabis. It's cannabis. It's not, you know, it's not a evil thing. Believe me. You know, it gets thrown in with the hard drugs. You know, crack, cocaine, heroin, and you know, like it gives, especially people like my grandmother, this look at it like it's, you know, how it's been looked at for so long. And I think we really need, especially now where it's being, people's eyes are opening up to the medical purposes here. It goes beyond that, and what it needs is people in higher, you know, places to address it. And you know, for myself, I mean, I've been using it for 8 years, you know, and I'm not very, very old, but I'm not too young, and I can say that it's unlike no other. It's safer to me than drinking. You know, I don't go out, I don't drive on it, I don't do anything. It's something I do within the privacy of my own home. It's not. And here's the big problem. How does one get it if they want it? And that's where, you know, there's a problem with dealing going on. And you want to, you know, I just think that there's a lot of problems with it. I think a lot of things are being suppressed about it.
Well, I don't deal with this on the relative danger of the different drugs. I mean, we have alcohol, we have tobacco, we have marijuana, we have heroin. I deal with this with the Constitution, the rule of law, and the way we're supposed to handle our problems and respect states' rights. So I don't want to put this in the category and say, well, marijuana isn't as dangerous as heroin, so therefore we ought to legalize marijuana. That's not my argument. My argument is the federal war on drugs is a total disaster, and that all things like this, I do not downplay the danger of all drugs. And one of the drugs that are killing the most people happen to be prescription drugs right now, and then alcohol. But the other drugs kill too. So we should never suggest that these drugs aren't dangerous. What I'm saying is that there's a greater danger in the way the federal government has tried to train people to behave. Federal government should not be in a role of making people behave better. And that is like now it's the federal government's teaching them that they shouldn't smoke cigarettes. Well, I detest smoking cigarettes too, but I do not think the federal government should be training our children. That should be the parents' job or local government or somebody else, but not up here with a police force. Now we have the agencies of government, including the DEA. There's federal agents now. There are 80,000 of them carrying guns, policing this country. We're working our way toward a police state, and a lot of people aren't very happy with that.
Miami Lakes, Florida. Good morning. Liberal Line.
Yes, good morning. As I look on the screen there, I can see snow in the background, and here in South Florida, we're going to have an 82-degree day with lots of sunshine and a cloudless sky. So I suggest that maybe we close down Congress and C-SPAN and come on down to Florida.
Thanks. You had to do that to us, didn't you?
Anyway, my point to the congressman is regarding the United Nations and what Congress can do. Number one, I'd like to recommend that we stop being the biggest deadbeat in the world and pay our $1.3 billion UN dues that have been on the books for some time. But also, number two, and equally as important, since we were one of the founders of the United Nations, one of the original signers of the United Nations, which in effect, and the media doesn't seem to want to talk about this very much, but the UN has codified international law. And we say we're a country of laws, but we seem to ignore international law or pick and choose when we want to follow it. For example, in Desert Storm, we used the United Nations and international law to throw back Iraqi troops from Kuwait. But we're using NATO, for example, in Kosovo, threatening to bomb a sovereign nation of Yugoslavia, and under international law, again, is codified by the UN, only the Security Council can do that. But, and I could go on and on, north and south fly zones in Iraq and so forth, that let's get Congress to say we're going to, once and for all, follow international law.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I think you sort of make my case that international law isn't very good because countries don't follow it unless they feel like it. So the fact the United States follows it sometimes and not at other times is an indication it's not worth much. But the real reason why we shouldn't be doing this is the justification for the Persian Gulf War was a UN resolution, not the people speaking through their members of Congress. That, to me, is atrocious. It should never happen, and we should not use the United Nations as a substitute for national sovereignty. As far as paying the past dues, there's no way I would ever vote to pay those past dues, mainly because they owe us money. We pay for all this police activity, and if you add it up, they're indebted to us. So this whole idea that we owe them money is just nonsense. So I support the idea that very little good comes out of the United Nations, and a great deal of harm is going to come, and we ought to talk seriously about getting out of it.
After that, he may not want you to come to Florida so quickly, Congressman.
Yeah, you won't invite me back.
Next is a call from Boulder, Colorado. Conservative Line. Good morning.
Good morning. You know, I just have to say, listening to you, in the parlance of my generation, right on. But really, I promised to talk about, you know, keeping the independent counsel, and after thinking about it a while, you know, the initial knee-jerk reaction is to get rid of it. I think maybe we ought to keep it because the notion of Janet Reno investigating Ken Starr when it should be the other way around is disconcerting. But what I was thinking about while you were talking was, you know, you were talking about education and really basically allowing the opposition to frame the predicate. In other words, not should we just get rid of the whole thing as it is now, as deleterious as it is now, and as much of a failure as it is now. That's not, that is the question. The question is not what we should adjust, what little knobs we should tweak or whatever. We have a total failure for an educational system, and I think that's just an example of, I guess, a cultural war that for the hearts and minds of America. So that was just my thought. Just yesterday I was seeing something about teaching children in school, grade school, second, third graders, self-esteem, and the statistics are now coming in, and some of these kids have less self-esteem than if they'd just been left alone. I just think that childhood is all about hope and dreams, and you don't need to teach them self-esteem. Just teach them how to live, and the rest will take care of itself. But anyway, that's my whole thing, and you're just doing a great job, and it's just nice to hear somebody who's rational.
Yeah. Well, on the education, I realize that we can't turn a switch and everything is going to be changed, so I have made the suggestion to introduce legislation that would allow every parent $3,000 tax credit per child to take it upon themselves to educate them. That does not mean they have to take them out of public school. Just use that money to educate their children, whether it's homeschooling, private schooling, or in addition to public schooling. And this would take the control out of the federal government. This idea that we can manage education from the federal level is the reason why education is in bad shape. Just very briefly, again, I want to repeat on the special counsel law. I understand the concern that we can't trust the president to investigate himself. But the Congress, if they would do a better job, they would be able to do the job as they did when they investigated Nixon.
The independent counsel investigating Henry Cisneros won a victory in federal courts yesterday. According to the Washington Post this morning, Bill Miller's story, a federal appeals court yesterday upheld an independent counsel's right to bring former Housing Secretary Henry Cisneros to trial on charges that he lied to the FBI about paying $250,000 in hush money to a former mistress. The decision was by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, who left intact all 18 charges against Cisneros. It goes on to say a three-judge panel unanimously rejected Cisneros' bids to have the charges thrown out on the grounds that the federal law prohibiting false statements to law enforcement officers does not apply to information provided during FBI background checks.